Welcome to OTR Debate, our off-the-record podcast where three attorneys debate all things while managing to find out how it all comes back to the law. I'm Huy, and I'm a transactional attorney. Lando, Mucci, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Lando. I'm a criminal attorney. I do prosecution.
Glad you said attorney after that. And I'm Mucci, and I work in the field of immigration.
Tonight's topic is one that we've heard about twice before, right?
Yeah. Aliens versus ghosts. As some viewers, listeners may remember, we've done this twice before, and on the last time we debated it, Mucci and I, we had a different judge. Since then, we've asked for a substitution of judge. We have we now. And the last episode ended with a settlement agreement, Mucci. I believe that was the deal there.
That's correct.
Yeah, and what was the terms of that settlement, Mucci?
Well, that we both agreed not to say the other person's thing didn't exist, so I can't say that aliens can't exist, and you can't say that ghosts don't exist.
And our podcast is off the record, but we got that on the record because Mucci just gave us the terms of the settlement, and, Your Honor, he violated the terms of the settlement. He, a couple days ago, he texted me, and let's play the footage.
Yeah, Lincolnsburg's a pretty cool neighborhood.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah, we should come here more often.
Yeah, I'm surprised we don't. Like, why wouldn't we?
Yeah, it's not too far.
Oh, hold on. Fucking Mucci. What does he want? The hell, Mucci? Nope. And you know what? I'm so pissed I'm declaring aliens aren't fucking real. I can't believe Mucci just broke the terms of the settlement. He's saying that aliens aren't real. That was the whole point of Aliens versus Ghosts 2.
Well, we're about to see him in a little bit, so we can talk about it then.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
I violated that on purpose, by the way. I don't care about disclosures.
All right, well, as always, the format is opening statements, followed by questions by yours truly, the judge. And then I'll have you guys close, and I'll make my verdict.
All right.
Since Mucci intentionally violated the terms of the settlement, Orlando, would you like to start with your opening?
I will. Your Honor, the world is starting to really open up to the possibility of aliens operating unidentified flying objects and having made contact with humans, being around for a long time now, in fact. It's with these sightings that are just piling up, and the headlines that read that the government's deciding to shoot them down. It's the headlines of congressional hearings where people are starting to share their stories and share and disclose certain things that our government is doing and knows about in terms of the possibility of alien life. It's becoming a reality, and we should all accept it. With that being said, I'd ask Your Honor to go down with the only verdict that all the evidence provides for. And that's for aliens.
Well, Your Honor, what you're going to hear today is that there is precedent for ghosts existing, and there is not for aliens existing that anyone can find. And I mean legal precedent. You will hear from a couple expert witnesses, Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess of the Astonishing Legends podcast, who are going to discuss aliens and ghosts. And I think you're going to find that they're going to come out more on the side of ghosts. And the reason for that is I don't believe they're going to be able to find a case that says that aliens exist in a certain area, but there is a case that they're going to talk about where ghosts were found to exist in a house. A house was declared legally haunted because the seller did not disclose it to the buyer. So with that, Your Honor, this is a precedent rules the day here. So I want you to take judicial notice of that precedent, even though it's from a different district, and come out on the side of ghosts here.
I see that settlements don't rule the day.
All right, so let's get into it. Question number one. Why do you think that we as humans are so drawn to the belief in extraterrestrial or supernatural and paranormal beings? Paint us a picture that you think best represents society's fascination with each of your sides, or give me some examples of what you think is credible.
Mucci?
Well, yeah, I would like to, instead of going with something current or recent, Yeah, I can look up ghost stories or ghost sightings like I did last time, and they're kind of a dime a dozen. You can kind of poke holes in them pretty often. But I wanted to examine, instead of giving something that get holes poked in it, the
I was ready. I was ready to poke them holes.
yeah, exactly. That's why I'm taking a different tack this time. I wanted to examine the utility of believing in ghosts to people. And what I want to discuss is going to go back to the middle 19th century, around the time of the Civil War. And spiritualism was a kind of major force around that time, even in the White House. And the First Lady, Mary Todd Lincoln, had, of course, famously lost her husband, but even throughout before that, lost children and everything like that. So she got into spiritualism and seances, held seances in the White House, including of her son. So she would remark that he comes to me every night and stands at the foot of bed with the same sweet, adorable smile he always had had. And she noted that he was sometimes accompanied by his other brother, Eddie, who had died. And the most famous, most well-documented ghost in the White House overall is Abraham Lincoln. State leaders have seen him. And also, at this time, after he had passed away, the nation was in a period of great mourning, so a lot of emotion, a lot of looking for reasons. And the reason that spiritualism kind of grew at that time was that kind of traditional religion didn't really answer a lot of these questions for people. People were looking for something that would allow them to contact their loved ones or just know that they still had some form of existence. And the father of the country is one of those people, in addition to the many people lost in the battlefield and the family members that were left behind. So this photographer, William Mumler, he was a spiritual photographer. He took a picture of Mary Todd Lincoln, and what he would do in his photographs, it would show an image of the person they had lost. And there's an image you can check out online where you can see or not Abraham, whether you believe it or not, Abraham Lincoln putting his hand on Mary Todd Lincoln. So I just wanted to highlight the, instead of a sighting here or sighting there, just the utility of believing in ghosts to people and why it can be a form of comfort when some other traditional methods of explaining our world aren't available to people or aren't believed by people.
I would say that a big reason why society is so fascinated with the idea of aliens and UFOs, these unidentified objects that are in the sky, is essentially there are just so many questions. You look up at the night sky, if you're not in a big city that's polluted, you're going to see so many stars out there. And it's just so massive and huge that you've got to wonder, what is my existence? What's out there? And so it just brings up so many questions. Ghosts, okay, you can think it's someone that passed away in a house. Where's the story in that, But Your Honor, I will give you an example of a recent sighting. I don't want to fish into a well that's from long ago and talk about irrelevant things. I'll talk about January 29, 2023. Pilot observes two white lights that are dancing around his plane as he's talking to air traffic controllers. This is in Upper Canada, around Yellowknife. I believe the town's called Yellowknife, and it's near a big lake. It's on a really big lake in Canada. He is talking to air traffic controllers and telling them that he sees these two white lights that are dancing above him. Now, what's interesting about this is that, like so many of these instances where pilots are observing different lights in the sky, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, but these types of people that are seeing these things, they know what they're looking at and what it's not. If you're flying a plane by yourself or with others that are experienced, you know what a plane looks like, what it's supposed to look like, what it can do, how it can maneuver. The lights that these pilots saw, and they were piloting a mid-sized plane. It was specifically, it was a twin turboprop plane. Around 11 p.m. that night, they saw these lights in the skies. They're talking to an air traffic controller, and they're talking about them doing these maneuvers. Clearly, they're interested in these lights. They're asking the air traffic controller if there's any plane in the area, if there's any air traffic in the area. They're telling them, no, we don't see anything on radar. I don't believe that the pilots saw that on their instruments as well, but they saw these lights and they were concerned about it. The audio of this conversation between the pilots and the air traffic controller, you could tell that they're concerned. They're telling them, and air traffic controllers like, we'll report this as unidentified. And at the end of it, the pilots are like, we're not crazy. They know that they're talking about something that is very unusual. They're not used to seeing it, but they're definitely seeing it. Your Honor, I do also have just a couple more examples of things that have happened lately that spark interest in the general population, and that is in February of 2023. So a little bit after the sightings that happened in Canada. Now, February 4th, as we all saw and we heard on the news, there was a Chinese weather balloon that was shot down off the coast of South Carolina. That is what it is. However, 2 other objects were shot down, one in Alaska and one over Montana, and those occurred February 10th and February 12th, respectively. The one in Alaska being described as cylindrical, shiny, and the size of a small car. So that was observed around over 40,000 feet. And the way that it was described after it was shot down is that it broke down after it was shot down and essentially hit the sea out in Alaska. So much different than what happened with the weather balloon over in South Carolina. It didn't break into pieces the way that it did in Alaska. The one over in Montana, 20,000 feet above Lake Huron, that was followed or preceded by radar anomaly, and that's how they found that out, and it was also shot down. Now, for both of these, we haven't heard much about what they were. There wasn't anything about, we found this. There's almost no information about what these were. So the weather balloon, we found that out pretty quickly. However, these 2 other objects in the sky that were shot down, no information about them. They're, still a mystery. So just a couple more examples of things that are happening in Canada, close to Canada, along with these strange lights.
Great. Thank you both. So moving away a little bit from quote unquote reality, are there any moments in pop culture, movies, art, etc., that you think further perpetuate your side's existence?
Yeah, well, kind of along with what I was saying about contact with ghosts being a form of comfort, the spiritualism, I think that ghosts are not necessarily always scary, whereas generally aliens are somewhat threatening. And some examples would be in Coco, in some family movies like Coco or Soul, where the concept
the gorilla?
No, Coco the monkey.
Okay.
Coco or Soul, or one of my personal favorites, Spirited Away, which is a little scary. Some of the ghosts are scary, but a lot of them are, Yubaba scary. But there's a great variety of ghosts in there, and I just love that it's also depicted in children's or family movies. But if you do want scary, I do recommend a Korean horror movie called A Tale of Two Sisters. And it's about a girl who comes home from a mental institution. She comes home to her dad, her stepmom, and her sister that she's very close with and protective of. And basically the house may be haunted by spirits such as her dead mother or maybe some other ghosts. I won't spoil anything. So really creepy psychological thriller.
So what you mean by that is may or may not be haunted.
Yeah.
Ghosts.
Yeah, well, just watch and do your own research. But I do want to give Lando a little credit, and I wanted to shout out a depiction of aliens that I really enjoyed recently, and I want to shout out this podcast, Get Played, one of our favorite podcasts, and more specifically, their kind of offshoot, Get Animated, it introduced me to this Haruhi Suzumiya series. And what that's about is like this girl in school who is fascinated with, she wants to start an investigation team to find out about aliens and people from the future, and people have ESP. And she doesn't know, but those people end up in the group with her, and they're secretly observing her. So the alien in that show, Yuki Nagato, is...
That's the alien's name?
Yes. She's a humanoid alien. She's passing as a human. She's meant to be a human, perceived as a human because they can't let the main character, or Haruhi, know that she's an alien, that's there to observe her.
So at this point, I was going to be calling an expert witness. 2 expert witnesses, in fact. But after a little bit of prep work behind the scenes, Mucci, I think that you got out of them what you need to know. Yeah. And they kind of lean towards your side of this, right?
Yes, I think both would be helpful for me because I think both do believe in ghosts as well as aliens, if nothing else.
And just so your honor is clear, they don't disbelieve in aliens. I just think that it would be more appropriate at this point for Mucci to call them as expert witnesses.
Okay.
Yeah.
So stipulated.
So stipulated. As to their qualifications, and we'll introduce them as expert witnesses at this time. So introducing the co-hosts of Astonishing Legends, we have got Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here.
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for the invite.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
So Mucci, I was really prepared to put these witnesses on, but if you just want to take it away with our first question, if you would.
Okay, yeah. So I think maybe it's important to start with what ghosts actually are. I think there's a lot of different explanations floating around there, whether they're spirits that haven't been able to rest or any other explanation that could be out there. What do you think is the most convincing or the best explanation that you have found for what ghosts actually are? So we can start from there, and that'll maybe inform the rest of it.
Scott, you want to lead off?
Sure, go ahead, Forrest.
Okay, then you can collect your thoughts a little. Well, as this is probably applies as well to the understanding of the UFO phenomenon, or UAP phenomenon as it's known now, is that when we were younger, years ago, you have an idea, probably garnered from popular culture and people about what these things are. But as we've dove into, we've researched and heard stories and anecdotes and done a lot of reading ourselves, that idea has expanded. So at first you would think, well, ghosts, if they exist, are the spirits of deceased people. And I think that is one category, but it has expanded over the years to include things that people call residual hauntings, which is perhaps trapped energy. If you've heard the stone tape theory, is that with human energy, and certainly we can generate electricity, like an electrical eel. Electric eels and other animals can generate fireflies and whatnot, can generate a little bit of current. Is that we imprint as human beings that sort of energy into our surroundings and environment. And so you would say, well, that's one reason perhaps why theaters and hospitals and funeral parlors have a lot of ghosts and claim a lot of hauntings, because a lot of that emotional energy, which was very high at the time, has been imprinted into the building. That's one type. So you, I would say, definitely have the classical type of a spirit, and for different reasons as well. They say if somebody has died unexpectedly or tragically, they may be wandering around as a lost spirit, have not departed to the other side or into the light. All those ideas. Because
you get about 7 days for that.
Yeah, they don't know they're dead yet. So that's one type of ghost. The other has of a human spirit. That's what I was trying to get at. Is that that's one category of human spirits. Is that they there's also some unfinished business here on Earth that they want to resolve, and they want to reach out to people and communicate that somehow. The other type, though, is just a residual type of image that people can see, and sometimes they will see an apparition that's only fully or partly formed. but it's not really the same thing as a human spirit. It's like seeing a visual echo of something from the past, and you can't really interact with it, but it's there. And so a lot of people claim to have seen that. So there are different definitions out there, and certainly people claim to have seen ghosts of pets, and I do believe that animals and other living things also leave an imprint of sorts. And so you have all various types of ghosts, not just human spirits, but all kinds of spirits, images, residual energy, that kind of. So the definition has grown broadly.
And that was kind of something that we had discussed internally just leading up to the episode and just throughout the duration of this podcast, really, is have we seen alien ghosts? Like, have Roswell ghosts laying around here somewhere? They're just wandering around the desert?
It's funny you mention that because, and again, it all depends on what you want to believe, either through just a firm conviction or it's just fun. So you're going to entertain the idea, have that suspension of disbelief, and just kind of entertain the thought because that's certainly how we started out, is that it's just fun to talk about. These are interesting concepts. We don't really have any proof or know, although some folks do, and they claim encounters. And I was talking to a friend of ours who started off as a guest and has become a friend through the show, but he is a psychic medium, and also we've talked to other people involved in the consciousness studies, you could say, who do claim that there has been contact with alien spirits, because if you figure they've traveled to this planet, they don't live forever, they're not immortal beings, they've passed away, and in this realm they're also kind of trapped or have not gone to wherever alien heaven is, so to speak. That it makes sense logically that there are alien spirits kind of floating around in the same predicament that humans have found themselves in after death. So yes, that is a real concept. I've heard that. It's not real common, and when you see something, when the average person sees something and they don't have that kind of mediumship connection to it or spiritual connection or that gut feeling, you don't really know what you're looking at. And so who knows? It definitely could be.
But Forrest, it's just a couple of things I want to step in on here real quick. One thing I would say is that I think it's an interesting question. It's like, has there been an alien ghost? And I can think of one instance of this that I've heard of, and I was just trying to source it, and now I can't remember where it was from. I feel like it might have been from James Fox's documentary Moment of Contact, which is but I'm not positive, which is a film about a craft coming down in Varginha, Brazil, in I think the 90s. A crazy story with aliens walking around in town and people seeing them and being freaked out and they smelled bad and all this stuff, just really crazy stuff with these aliens and a ship crashing. And if you watch this documentary, which is really unbelievable, it came out in 2022, and you see the eyewitness, especially the one who saw the craft come down, if the guy's lying, take him straight to the Oscars and the BAFTAs. He should get everything right away because he's just freaking out about it. But I can't remember if it was in that or something else. We consume so much media related to this in our study of it. I know that there was some point where they were talking about the building where the survivors from a particular crash, and now I can't remember if it was Roswell or some other. God, was it Roswell or some other crash where they took surviving alien beings and they passed away in the building, and people that worked in the building later, and it might have been at Wright-Patterson, reported seeing ghosts of those aliens in that building. It was like a hospital unit back in the day. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was
Varginha. Could have been Varginha.
I think it might have been in there. But they basically were like, when you work in this, you would at night you would see these things, and so I think that's the one of all the stuff we've covered. We're 270 episodes in, 9 years right now. The only time I've heard of something that we would classify as humans as an alien ghost is that. The building that these surviving aliens from a crash died in, people say that they are seeing something that looks like a ghost, that looks like an alien. But the other thing that I will add to what Forrest was talking about, there's a couple things he was talking about. People that maybe have died suddenly. Our friend Brandon Masulo wrote a book called The Ghost Theory or Ghost Studies.
Yes.
In that book, he talks about, he actually has a degree in parapsychology from the University in Edinburgh, which is one of the few universities that teaches that. And he talks about crisis apparitions in that book, which is a fascinating thing, where the apparition presents itself to people that are closely related sometimes before it's actually the accident or whatever the sudden death is has actually happened. So the relative sees their aunt, their mom, their whatever right before they fall down the stairs or the car crash happens or whatever. That's called a crisis apparition. And I'll thank Masulo for coming up with that. But then the other thing that I think is interesting is there's an idea that there's a cat and mouse thing, and there's a book called The Trickster and the Paranormal that talks about this, but there's a little bit of a cat and mouse thing that goes on with all of these interactions. And this is the kind of thing that Forrest and I have only seen after years and years of covering this kind of stuff, where even though each experience is very different, there's this common ground with it. And that common ground is that you're being toyed with. There's a high level of sentience, and also there's a recognition of all the things you're trying to do to prove that it's there or not there, or it's real or not real. And it knows all that stuff you're trying, and whatever gear you bring, it's going to break it. It's going to suck the battery dry. It's going to knock the tripod over. It's going to whatever. That is across the board with all different kinds of experiences. So there are some folks that are like, whatever it is that we think we're trying as humans to get that cognitive closure and classify, is this a ghost? Is this an alien? Is it whatever? It's like, it's just doing that because those are the boxes that we have in our mind. It may be a far bigger thing that we can't quite wrap our heads around.
Messing with this. What one thing that I thought was really interesting that you mentioned, Forrest, was that you mentioned some of the locations where ghosts are seen, and you mentioned hospitals. Okay, I thought
Right.
think of that, cemeteries, whatever, and think of that.
Yeah.
But you mentioned theaters, and I think of those other locations as places where there's a lot of emotion because people have died. I never thought of theaters where there's a lot of emotion because the actors are playing roles and demonstrating emotions.
Absolutely. That is exactly right. And that's, at least in my theory, that I believe is true, and why you see so many theaters. That's one of the very first places. That was the first ghost walk that I ever did with Scott and I at the Kent Paranormal Weekend, where it's at the Kent stage in Kent, Ohio, where the university is. And that's the first time we walked on there, and I started thinking about that, the reason that happened. And yes, there was one gentleman who was the caretaker who did pass away.
Oh yeah.
He had a workshop in the basement where he worked at fixed stuff on the theater. He did have a heart attack. Sadly, we could speak a little bit about that because Scott did have a tiny bit of an experience with that.
Yeah.
But there was another gentleman who didn't actually die there, but he was a volunteer, and he's a beloved guy, Mel,
and a benefactor too. I think like a big time donor. I think he was wealthy.
Yeah,
he
contributed,
kind of like a patron. Yeah.
Yeah, but mostly his time. He just loved to help out. He loved the local community theater there, and he would just donate his time and help out around the place. And so people, he always, he was famous for having a big old hot coffee with him, and he would just carry that around. So always, and people still claim to smell coffee just when
if you sit in his seat or near the row where he always sat.
Yeah, and so he's like a friendly apparition. But you're right. I think because the emotions are played on stage, and that's both comedy, as with a hospital, and also churches, of course, is that you have births and deaths, sickness. You have a lot of joy, but also some sadness. Same thing in church, and then same thing on that's being played out on stage. And then along with that, you have the emotion of the audience reacting, and you have sadness with tragedy and people weeping. You also have a lot of laughter and suspense, and so it's a very highly charged place. Now there are, of course, some. I don't know if Scott can speak to this. One of my favorite celebrities anecdotes with this was with Anna Gasteyer from Saturday Night Live, who was, I just caught a clip, but I'd never heard the story before, but she was performing at I believe, an old theater in Chicago that had a terrible fire, and she was seeing apparitions. It first started because she was singing as the witch in Wicked,
yes,
and being raised above the stage, and she's like, well, I let a lot of, I guess it's cast and crew family day. There's a lot of people standing in the wings. That's weird. And I guess and she then was lowered, and the lights are on, you can't really see. And then later on, she was seeing different people in period costume. Well, now you think, well, maybe there's a play here that I don't know about. They're just rehearsing as soon as we're done. And no, it turns out, that place had a lot of death because people were trapped in there and they burned, sadly. And it was women and children. And
yeah, she has told me this story in person, and you would not believe the conviction when she's sharing it. Yeah, it was very real experience for her.
Right. So yeah, to your question there, I think there's all sorts of reasons, and it's not just one. I think that's the case that I'm making, is that there's people like to think things are mutually exclusive. Like, well, it can't be haunted, nobody died there, or that ghost didn't die there, that can't be that ghost. It's like, I don't think that they're necessarily trapped. They can be, they cannot be. It's just, one is not mutually exclusive to the other.
Right. And coming back to the thing that we'll say again is something, and by the way, this is, if you're having us on, you're gonna have to do more editing than you ever do. But coming back around to what Forrest was saying, and something that we've mentioned ever since we covered the true story behind the haunting at the Conjuring House, is that you can never be sure of what you're interacting with. And this is also connects to a series we did on the Siren Call, the Hungry Ghost, and the Vertical Plane. And all of it, that whole trickster part, you can never quite trust it. You have to really be like, when I first moved to New York right after 9/11 or whatever, at that time still, when you would go way down to Wall Street, you knew that's where you went to get the fake Rolexes and all that kind of stuff. So like, when you're in this environment, hey, you know what? I want a fake Rolex, $20. This is going to be great. It's going to work for a couple of months, etc. You've got a certain amount of awareness when you're dealing with the folks that are selling the fake Rolexes. That's the kind of thing you need to think about whenever you're having a paranormal experience. What is this thing really trying to do to me? Can I trust that it is who it says it is? That it is a ghost, that it's this or that and the other. And because the other thing that we found is with people who are a little bit skeptical of these interactions is sometimes folks will be like, well, that can't be that ghost because it didn't live in this house. It lived up the street. And it's like, you're already on the wrong playing field here. This is a, so cliche, but it's, it's the 3D chess thing. It's like, it's another, there's so much more going into this, and you have to question all of the information. It's like the Cold War, essentially. Like, these things are double agents. There's all kinds of different languages at play and different motivations. That's what I personally believe. So
I wanted to touch back on something Scott was saying, because I mean, all this really, any sightings of ghosts or any kind of phenomenon that's supernatural or UFO sightings, everything comes back to really the credibility of who's seeing it, who's talking about it.
That's right.
Their conviction behind what they've seen. And I mean, really, when you put on a trial, when you do stuff in court, the evidence is testimony. We might wave stuff around that we're showcasing as part evidence, but the bulk of evidence is testimony. So when we have people that come in and say, I saw these things that happened in this house, or things are flying off the shelves, or I saw these lights in the sky, that is testimony, and that is evidence of these different things. I just, in terms of it all being interconnected, I think that there's, a possibility for that. And that brings me to the congressional hearing. If I could just ask you a question about that. Not so recent, I guess it was a few months ago, the United States congressional hearing with retired Air Force Colonel David Grush testified alongside two former pilots, right? Yes. Testified about essentially a government program that was misappropriating funds to fund their research and their program of recovered aircrafts, unidentified aerial crafts, as well as recovering non-human biology. So I guess my question to you guys is, what do you think is going to happen next? Like, where are we going to go from that? Are we going to start seeing that everything is connected? I know that that's a big thing with you guys, because you make a valid point and a valid theory of this all could be connected. These sightings of what people think is a ghost could, in fact, just be something that they don't understand or that we can't understand, and it's tied into some sort of UFO sighting or some alien sighting. If you guys just want to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's interesting because it's funny. We cover a lot of different types of things in our research and our work, and UFOs is only part of it. We're not dedicated to UFOs. Lots of other folks are that are more knowledgeable about UFOs and UAP than we are. Right. But one thing that we have been on top of is, at least since the the front page newspaper story on disclosure and this idea of it in what was that, 2017? I
Right.
think.
Yep.
Yeah, that right, November.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. It tracks that this is taking years to play out, and that it goes in fits and starts. And what is the data? I mean, Dave Grush's character is pretty reliable. I think, you guys are the lawyers, so you would have to tell me how he stands up when you look at his CV and his bona fides and whatever, and like what kind of person he is. But most folks don't have as many high-ranking officials behind them as he does, that are coming out and saying, no, this guy's top notch. I've been working with him for years. You can trust him. He's level-headed. He's respectable, and all of that kind of thing. The problem with his testimony, obviously, is that it's hearsay. I guess he's talking about things that he's heard, and a lot of the information that he is trying to convey is classified, and he's unable to reveal that outside of a skiff, which is a compartmentalized room where nobody can take any phones in. We've all seen it on 24, whatever. So if it's like, and they couldn't get in those rooms. And with the interesting thing that I learned about the congressional hearings was how hard it is to schedule skiff time, apparently, because that was the whole, they're not letting them in, and then it's like, oh, is there a conspiracy about them getting in the skiff? It's like, maybe, I don't know. But one of the things that we've also talked about is the difference between Title 10 and Title, I think it's 50, level of knowledge related to national defense and also the U.S. government. And the idea that with the Title 10 stuff, that's about as high as Congress gets in most cases. And the Title 50 is this super high level stuff. And it's like those are the guys that when the sitting president, whoever it is, comes and says, show me this stuff, and they go, nope. That's the Title 50 people. So the Title 50 and the Title 10 people, they're operating with different budgets, different levels in the Pentagon. There's different folks in charge, and they're not meeting in the middle at all. There's like a Grand Canyon between them in terms of sharing information and what's happening financially and in every other way, informationally and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we have read and understood through different guests that we've had on the shows and things that we've covered over the years. So when you get Grush coming forward, and he's basically saying, he's wanting to say all this Title 50 stuff, but he's doing it in a Title 10 forum, and that's a big problem. So how do they get to the point where they can share that information? All kinds of legislation has to be passed. There's legal barriers for him. That's why the whistleblower status is so important. That allowed him to get his foot in the door in that case. Now, do we believe him or not? I don't know. In terms of, I can't speak for Forrest. For me, I find him to be a believable character. But I also, and Forrest and I both will, I think, and I'm, again, not speaking for Forrest, but like, I think we will both say that it's possible for high-level people to be tricked internally by the government. However, we also, at this point, been doing the show a while, we got friends in the government, like high-level people in high-level departments, and almost to a person, they will tell you the government is not this organized. Nothing works this well. We can't keep a secret. And nobody is compartmentally, creating a conspiracy or whatever. They're like, it's not that organized. So you got to take all of that and put it all in the mix with regard to disclosure. And going back to what I said earlier tonight about, do we really know what any of this is? Maybe not. And that's such a vague, unsatisfying thing. But it's to say, we're not saying there's not a phenomenon. It's there. There's phenomena there. There are individual phenomena there. Like, all of that stuff is there. Is it aliens? Is it ghosts? Is it bodies that have crashed? Is the craft even in this dimension? Is it interdimensional? Is it a holographic universe? There's all that stuff that's outside the realm of our comprehension. But somehow it is shining a light in here. And someone, we were just recording something last night, and one of our guests was talking about how an experience that it was Rob Christopherson, has a show called Our Strange Skies, the most knowledgeable UFO expert we know, actually UAP expert. And he was talking about how it's almost like these pilots were reporting incidents where, like, you would play with a cat with a laser pointer. Just these things are flying, and the plane is trying to find the thing like a cat, like a kitten would try to find the red dot. And that toying, that goes back to the trickster part, but also the idea of reflecting light goes back to something Grush said in the hearings about how the holograph. It was a very simple little sentence. It was the first time that I wrapped my head around the holographic universe, when he was just like, think of how you can cast a shadow into this other realm. And this was interesting to me because I'm a collector of rare books, and one of my favorite, actually the nicest rare book I have is Flatland, which is a geometric story, and it talks about the relationships between dimensions and how a three-dimensional sphere and a two-dimensional plane looks like a line, and it explains all of that. And that's the holographic universe idea. And so when Grush said, just imagine you're casting a shadow, or one thing I think about is like when you have your watch on and you're at dinner with a friend or your date or whatever, and you realize the sunlight's catching it, and if you just do it the right way, you can zap them in the eye or whatever and annoy them. But that's like, at that point, what are you doing? You're controlling just light. You're controlling something, and it's defying physics in a lot of ways. It's moving in ways that a real physical object couldn't move. Now, if you take that idea and you say that light that's coming from your watch and it's in your friend's or your partner's eyeball, what if that actually became a craft that could collect data and collect information? And what if that's what we're dealing with now with these ships? They're not even really here, but they are some kind of drone that's an example of the most forward-thinking technology that's related to that kind of projection. So that's really getting out there with everything. But like that's what I think about when I think about the connections, and I think about Grush, and I think there's more information coming forward. There's an ex CIA gentleman named John Ramirez who says that this disclosure, this is all happening in these steps, and that we're in the fourth step now, and the fifth one will be when they come forward. Like right now, they're collecting all the witnesses and the information, and all the rest of this is going to come forth in 2025. It's always next month, next year, or whatever. But
that was actually
this is the plan. But
yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that. If you guys have heard about because I've been seeing it in a lot of different places where it's from 2017, a 10-year kind of disclosure timeline for 2027.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of folks think. Forrest, go ahead.
Well, that's just, yes, so that's putting that out there. I think what people, us included, you fellas and Scott and I, everyone who's remotely interested in this, and even if you aren't, you're going to have to be at some point. That's my personal belief, because you just can't ignore it anymore, and ignoring it's not going to make it go away. Is that this could possibly be a reality for the entire planet, and in that timeline is that, you just don't announce one day. It's that you have to ease into it. So that's one theory, is that this is what's happening now, is that we're being eased into it. But if to your question, though, what's going to happen next? Well, I also believe this, as well as we know throughout the course of human history, if this is all true, if any of this is true, we're talking about technology that's been kept from us for at least 100 years, that we can understand, regardless of what's been back engineered, is that we're talking about world-changing, life-changing, spiritually changing, or quashing, however you want to look at it, technology that can do everything from cure cancer to create a literal death ray that could, and we're looking at craft that outpaces anything that we have and can conceive of in our understanding of physics currently. Any craft in the world that we have is no match for this. Imagine what they can do. If you look at past cases like Malmstrom Air Force Base, the missile base there, there was a sighting that came of a craft that came by and shut off all the nukes that were there independently. They're not connected. It's not like a system crash. They're all, because that's the way it's planned, they're all individually operated, each missile in the silo, and they shut them all off. And what's the point? Then they can do it, and I'm sure they weren't just goofing around. they knew they could do it. It's a message, is that there's nothing you have that we cannot control, including your personal physical selves. So this is the biggest news on the planet, or will be, potentially. And then you're talking about a technology. Well, first of all, what a crime that maybe cancer could have been cured 50 years ago, and you've been sitting on it because you want to control that. So this is the other theory, is that you're talking about a technology, a discovery that is of immense wealth, power, and value. And we're talking untold, unimaginable wealth if you're in control of that, because it would control everything. And we're talking about transportation. We're talking about saving the planet, if you're interested in that, reversing the greenhouse effect. Everything that so many things that we're struggling with now could have been cured, but you guys have been sitting on it because they want to control it for the military aspect, and then you get into the military-industrial complex controlling all of this. My point being is that whoever's controlling this will want to keep it a secret as much and as possible and as long as possible as they can to control it. And to that point, what Scott was talking about, people high up, there is one memo now that's being resurfaced that came into the possession, I believe, of Jacques Vallée, noted UFO researcher and physicist, with another physicist, Eric Davis, meeting with Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson, and it's called the Wilson, the Davis-Wilson notes memorandum, because he took notes of this meeting. And basically, how this happened is that you have a vice admiral, and I believe the story is that he was in charge of Pentagon the budget, and he was seeing a massive deficit of something like $8 billion or more. And so he tracked it down, like, well, I got to find out where this money's going. That's my job. We owe it to the American people. This is their money. And he tried to get into a facility. And the other thing is that a lot of this, to garner that control, is in the hands of private industry. We're talking about aerospace industries, technology industries, construction industries. And because then they're not accountable. You can't do a FOIA request on them. So they're holding
if
this
it's a
technology.
private company, FOIA doesn't work.
Right. But just to speak to how powerful this, if you want to say cabal, I'm not. I don't, look, we have no skin in this game, other than we find it interesting, we're reporting on it, is that Thomas Wilson, Admiral, Vice Admiral at the time, tried to get access to this, like, hey, I have Pentagon authority here. And they're like, nope. And he was denied.
That's the Title 10, Title 50 stuff I was talking
So,
about.
yes. So it's like, no, it's like, how can you deny? Well, first of all, don't the American people deserve answers? That's the other big question. But because I have you fellows here and three lawyers and experts in this, one thing that we get that connects to Grush, and this is a knock on so many other paranormal things that we talk about, is people are always poo-pooing the idea of eyewitness testimony being valid. And our counter is like, hey, it's still admissible in court. It's like and with the paranormal and all this other weird stuff, that's the only proof you get. Like, I saw this happen. I'm willing to testify under oath in court that this happened. And the knock against Grush is, what people say, like, regardless of them going after his character and any personal problems he had in the past, which is a low blow in my opinion. But they're saying, like, well, he just said he saw this, or he saw photos, or he heard this or that. So, what's your guys' opinion on the validness of eyewitness testimony when it comes to Grush? He says, look, I'm testifying that I was shown things. I didn't see them in person, but high up people that I respect, either they're all shining me on for some unknown purpose, but I am telling this eyewitness, testimony secondhand because these other people did see this stuff. They were in the room with this technology and supposedly any biomorphs. So how does eyewitness testimony fare with you guys?
Well, sorry. Just real quick, and I sometimes kind of like to keep my job a little close to the vest, but I will just say
sure.
that in the realm that I'm in, which is immigration, we have some proof, sometimes some, but a lot of the proof is affidavits. They're written. Right. Someone's testifying to something, and then other than that, the majority of the evidence that is at play is verbally, vocalized during an interview. And, whether you believe that or not is kind of up to the officer or whoever is evaluating it, or if it's in court, the judge. But that is what it is. That is so much of what evidence is in my field.
And the other thing that I wanted to say was I had a bet with myself how long it would take for Forrest to turn this around into us interviewing you. He went longer than I thought.
Hey, we don't. No, here's the thing: is that is partly what we're talking about here is trying to get a handle in some kind of framework, and I think we have always talked about this. In the framework of the legal field of something like a court, because like what else do we have? Well, it ain't perfect, of course, but it's the best thing that we've come up with in 200-300 years. So it's one way of looking at it that's standardized, but it's a very intangible subjects that we're talking about here. And again, it is eyewitness testimony, it's hearsay, it's this and that, but sometimes you do get some leftover residue. And so what we're talking about here with this congressional thing is that he's saying we got the smoking gun. We have physical evidence, which is really what everybody wants to see. They want to see Exhibit A. What is that? It's this craft here. And
Ghost in a jar.
There you go. Now, to your question of what's more likely is it to see a UFO or to see a ghost or evidence thereof? I think because of the nature is what we talked about. I also like to bookend these things. Is that circling back around? Is that with spirits, there are locations that do seem to produce more effects. So therefore, you can go to these places, and it may be one time out of 1,000, but something weird and unexplainable may happen. Whereas, unless you are of the belief that there are contactees and experiencers and people who have been abducted, sometimes those happen throughout lifetimes. And then there's some people who seem to be able to conjure up, so to speak, different aerial phenomenon in the form of orbs or lights or this and that. Dorothy Isett has a interesting documentary where she was continually filming these lights in the sky, very unusually, with her Super 8 camera. So she was able to almost like she could produce this phenomenon, but that's very rare. Also, in the series Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, there was a gentleman who lives near is it Turtle Bay, Cape Fear, Scott? It's somewhere on the Cape Fear River. He was able to seemingly produce weird aerial phenomenon. So you were talking about psychic links again. Well, that does happen. We've heard stories, but it's very rare. But more likely, you can go to a haunted location, and if you may take you a bunch of nights and all night lockdowns, but you can find at least very small amounts of weird stuff that happens that there was no reason for it to happen. So you can call that ghost activity, all the way up to seeing a full apparition. So that can be, it's a different way of looking at it. And I think of the two, I would rather not have the UFO experience.
Fair. That's very fair.
But yeah, that goes to something Mucci and I have talked about somewhat
both
frequently.
Episodes, actually.
That if you go to a location that is haunted, you're more likely to be able to, get involved with the scientific process of reproducing something that has either happened before or some sort of phenomenon.
Well, it's measurable. Even like I said, you can get just in odd things, and you get a number of them together. That's why a lot of ghost hunters like to take a lot of toys, or sometimes they actually are toys. There's a bear that lights up. I think his tummy has different colored lights, and it's a proximity sensor. And so if a child gets near it, like it'll hello and sing a little tune and lights up. And those things go off. So either something electromagnetically, maybe is something.
It's nothing I want
in
to
the
hear
house.
less in a paranormal
than a toy coming to life. But
zero.
A lot of people will say like, well, there you go. That's just wiring in the house. But a lot of these places are very old. There's no electricity in there. There's nothing that's really sparking this to go off. There's no real reason for this to happen. Of the two, though, like I said, you can go to this place and experience this, but more often than not, nothing is going to happen. And so people think like that's another preconceived notion is like, well, I took the tour at this place and nothing happened. It's like it's not a slot machine. It doesn't pay off just because you put money into it. There's a lot of interpersonal connection to it, and I think that it depends on the person. There's the Michigan J. Frog is from the old Warner Brothers cartoons. Like you can go there with all this stuff, nothing happens. As soon as you pack it away in the car, that's when you see the ghost. That's the elusive part that Scott was talking about. There's also, as far as the other phenomenon goes, there's also a lot of reports of the two overlapping, where at a location, sometimes an outdoor one, where people will see a lot of spooks. One you were talking about past episodes. We've done with Huska Castle in Eastern Europe, which is a notoriously old, famous haunted place. People say, "Oh, it's the gates of hell," and this and that. Well, there's a lot of reports of orbs flying around in the sky. A lot of UFO reports. Same thing with Lake Baikal, as people will see wandering spirits around the lake, but they also see lights coming out of the lake. So there is some kind of overall grand unified, I believe, theory on the interconnectedness of all this phenomenon, and it's not. People even see Sasquatch and weird cryptids at these locations. If you do an overlay of a map, people were saying that Linda I'm trying to think of the author's name, Scott, who did Beast of Bray Road.
Linda Godfrey.
Linda Godfrey.
She passed away last year. Yeah.
Yeah, and other people have done map overlays of like, okay, these are Native American burial mounds or ancient graveyard areas where people see a lot of ghosts. But it's also where people have seen the Michigan Dogman or these other weird cryptids. Like there's something going on at these spots. It's like a Skinwalker Ranch kind of thing. Like it's just a portal, it's a kitchen sink, and all this weird stuff's coming through.
Right. So, Mucci, I'm sure you're satisfied with the testimony here. Yeah. That's going to really hurt my case here.
I just want to say, I think if a judge was actually present, we would have heard over and over and over again, objection relevant.
Well, that's the thing. It could be all relevant in ways we don't understand yet. But I think people have, at least it's changed since I was growing up and I was a kid aware of it, is that people are now asking better questions. There's more better questions and more evidence we've collected.
Right.
And just our understanding of it has really grown, and you can evidence that by watching some old Twilight Zones, which were talking about some of this phenomenon that's happening, but they didn't really have terms for that or ways to understand it. It was very interesting. It was borrowed from real life because I don't think there was any start or stop date for all this stuff. It's always been happening. But you can see that the way that they talk about it is less informed than how we do now.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Scott, Forrest, if you guys want to close this out with anything else that you guys want to talk about.
And talk about your podcast, plug your podcast. People know
of course.
Sure. Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, let's see. Well, I would just say thank you so much for having us on. It would actually be fun to have you guys on our show. Maybe the next time there's a congressional hearing or something else legal going on. For this, we have 3 shows in a row in October. The first one's going to be Listener Stories, which is something we did last year. That'll be airing or dropping on the 14th. Then on the 21st and the 28th, we are doing a 2-part series on the story of the Entity, a haunting that happened in Culver City in the 70s. It's a super freaky story, and it has a lot of legal ramifications because there's the people that don't believe anything actually happened. They think other criminal acts may have been going on, and the folks that do say, no, it was a ghost, and it's one of the worst hauntings of all time. So
we October's coming up. We got some interesting stuff. We'd love to have you folks on. Should we have some of that come up? And like I said, those worlds cross. Everything kind of overlaps here. It is all kind of vaguely connected, but as Scott and I said, like a lot of this stuff, the importance is not just the event or what happened, it's how as we as humans deal with it.
Well, thanks guys.
Thank you so much.
Wealth of knowledge here, and I really appreciate you guys for coming on.
Thanks for having us on.
Yes.
And we appreciate it, and we'll look forward to promoting this when it comes out. And if you wind up using this, people can find Astonishing Legends wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, before we start wrapping things up, I would like all of you guys to do us a quick favor and subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you're on, add us and give us a review. And also check out our Expert Witnesses podcast, Astonishing Legends. They have about 9 years worth of content, diving a little deeper into the concepts discussed today, as well as many others that are pretty related. Thanks, and I'll get back into it. So typically with our podcast format, when we get to question 3, it's always going to be bringing the topics back to the law. In this case today, I've heard a lot from the expert witnesses on both sides, and I've heard a lot of great arguments from both Orlando and Mucci. So instead of doing a question 3, just want to hear a sentence or two within your closing arguments, tying your cases back to the law.
I'll start if that's okay with you, Mucci.
No objection.
No objection. Your Honor, the key word is disclosure. What we've heard from as far as our expert testimony and what we have today in the world is a congressional hearing where we saw a retired colonel from the Air Force as well as 2 former pilots testified as to their experience and their knowledge relating back to unidentified flying objects, as well as things that were recovered from those aircrafts. Now, that program being intended to reverse engineer what was recovered and being essentially held secret from not only typical people, everyday citizens, but Congress as well. something completely illegal and Congress having the power of the purse and allocating funds and such. This secret program is misappropriating funds. There are going to be consequences, and this is going to lead to a lot of other things in terms of disclosure, in terms of investigation, to find out where those funds were going. And I mean, it's a big deal. You know, as soon as money gets involved, answers are brought forth. I think that that'll be the one thing that brings Congress to move swiftly, whereas maybe they haven't been in the past.
Okay. And, Your Honor, again, I want to go back to the fact that there is a case that was decided on this, Stambosky versus Ackley, where the New York Appellate Court held, as a matter of law, the house is haunted. We discussed that earlier with our expert witnesses, but the seller had said the house was haunted by poltergeist, had reported it in the local and national news, and then never disclosed that to the buyer. The buyer initially signed the contract without being aware, but then when he was informed of it, and he went to meet with the seller, and she was so passionate in explaining the ghost, or actually poltergeist, encounter that he filed an action for rescission or cancellation of the contract and damages for fraudulent misrepresentation. So the court found that after the seller had many times announced to the national local media that her house was haunted by poltergeist, she was stopped from denying their existence. Legal term essentially refers to the fact that she can't go back on her word, on her representation, and claim that it's not haunted, since she was saying to many people, whoever would listen, that the house was haunted. And as we discussed with our expert witnesses, this is one where the court had some fun with the opinion. I hope Your Honor can appreciate that. They just used some lines like that were just either puns or references to ghosts. No divination is required, or plaintiff hasn't a ghost of a chance, or this will come back to haunt him. And something about a hobgoblin, I don't remember, but and reference Ghostbusters. So in any event, take these funny judges into consideration, and find that ghosts exist, Your Honor, as these judges did. Judges with a sense of humor.
I'd like to think I'm a judge with a sense of humor. So ultimately, what it comes down to, my ruling today, is that based on where I was previously, prior to hearing all of the evidence today, to where I am now, my belief in ghosts has increased the most. So I'm going to rule in favor of ghosts.
What a roller coaster that was.
What a rhyme, too.
Well, this has been OTR Debate.
Thanks for listening
and watching.
Love you.